Seth Everett, NBC Sports Radio, the 24/7 live sports talk network, which you can listen to at NBCSportsRadio.com. Joins us to talk about that, the World Series, and the offseason ahead. Welcome back, my friend. Seth, what's happening?
Hey, what's going on, man? Yeah, exciting time for Philadelphia. That's sure thing.
Yeah, let's before we get to epic series. Game 7 kind of didn't live up to it last night, but the Phillies made it kind of an outside the box. The Old Boys Network. You've been around that team a long time. A little outside the box hiring for them. Were you surprised that Matt Klintek went that route?
I really was, and I'm thrilled for Gabe. I know this is something he wanted to do. I got a chance to know him really well when he was a player, and really one of the more progressive players that I ever had the chance to deal with. And I just think he's a fascinating person. How does that translate to the manager? Well, it's part of a trend where, teams are hiring these young managers, and you're starting to see guys that are relatable to millennials. And I know that sounds strange that we're talking about baseball players, but that's how old baseball players are, So, it has to be somebody that's relatable. And I think the days of Buck Showalter and Jim Leland and Tony La Russa, Lou Piniella, and Dusty Baker are numbered. It's not that guard anymore. It's this new guard. And, if I had to pick a young player that I covered in my heyday, this is my 22nd year doing this, but Gabe Kapler and I are similar ages, so I hung out with him a lot, and I did a lot of radio shows with him a lot, and I like the way he thinks. But this is more of a manager by committee. This is now research and sabermetrics and playing by the numbers and all of that, and you're starting to see that. Torey Lovello in Arizona, and Craig Counsell in Milwaukee, and A.J. Hinch in Houston, Dave Roberts in Los Angeles. You start to see these guys that not too long ago were players.
Yeah, it's a trend that's going that way. Guys with no managerial experience, and basically, Dave Roberts. A lot of times they map out the whole game before the game even starts. You're going to throw 4 innings, and that's going to be it. We're going to go to this guy. I don't know.
It used to drive Terry Collins nuts because they would.
It drives me nuts, man. Seth, it drives me nuts.
Well, but here's the thing, it changes the way we have to look at, these post-game press conferences because, a lot of times, I remember, when I was traveling with the Mets, people would go up to Terry Collins and after the game and they'd say, why'd you bring in Johnson in the 6th inning? He knows it's because he was told to, but he doesn't throw them under the bus. So he comes up with some BS excuse, and then the next thing you know, people are saying, how does Terry Collins have bullpen management? I'm telling you, Gabe Kapler, if something happens with Gabe Kapler, you're going to say to me, I don't understand what this guy's doing. And I'm going to say, that's coming from the top.
Wow.
There is a sabermetrician on his, somebody asked me about Alex Cora and the Red Sox and the addition of Tony La Russa as an executive vice president. And all I said is that's a new one of his fave fives.
Hey, with
that's another cook in the kitchen.
With that, now I came on the air the other day. Everybody loved the 25-run Game 5. I was a fan of Game 6. Is this the conversation we're having here? That I like the game I like the National League game. I love the fact that Hinch had to make the decision on Verlander. I thought he made the wrong decision. He takes him out of the game the night before. I'm just waiting for the next home run. Which game we're going to see more of those games or the 3-1 games?
Well, let me put it this way. A lot of people said this was the best ever. I didn't think it was close to the best ever. This didn't feel like 86. This didn't feel like 91. This didn't feel like 2001. It didn't have that vibe to it. What I thought baseball sells the best, and this is something that people overlook because they haven't seen it in such a long time. Let me give you a crazy number. Over 76% of teams do not come back in the regular season against these A-list bullpens. And because of that fact, the drama is kind of minuscule. You combo that. People think it's because of all the pitching changes late in games. It slows the pace down and it makes it unwatchable. The reality of it is you lose faith that your team can come back. Well, starting with the early games, especially Game 2, a 4-0 lead wasn't sacred. So it wasn't insurmountable. And the fact that you didn't know which team was going to win until the very last out. You still, even in that game, you thought the Dodgers could come back in that game, and you realize that's not what 21st century baseball is.
Yeah.
Baseball is one where bullpens are specialized, and in both of these cases, the bullpens were exposed. So I don't think it's more about the 25 runs and the 8,000 home runs. I always say, I'll trade you half the home runs, give me half the strikeouts. But the reality of it is that baseball just had drama, and that's why people assume drama means it's the best ever. It wasn't close to the best ever.
I agree a lot. I was entertained by the game. It doesn't mean I thought it was good baseball. Fair?
Yeah, no, you're right. You know, my attitude is it wasn't incredibly well played. I'll say that. It wasn't one of those games where we find ourselves looking at the quality of the game. I had no skin in the game. You know what I mean? I didn't care who won. I rooted for Houston. I love that city, and I feel for what that city's been through, but I really didn't care. And if the Dodgers had won, I would have slept fine last night. I'm fine with it. The only drama I would have wanted to know is, does Carlos Correa get married? And this idea that if we're talking about him from a quality of game standpoint, I mean, they were two mismanaged teams, they were two mismanaged bullpens, but you saw heart, you saw gutty efforts from a lot of young men. Springer really showed me something. Altuve showed that he's the best player on his team, and he's the MVP of the league this year. And I just think there are a lot of things there are more positives to take away than negatives. But it was not without negatives.
Seth Everett's with us. So, if in Philadelphia the last couple of years the basketball team had been trusting the process, was that the underrated story of the Astros, that this was a team that essentially tanked multiple times? They got 100 losses 3 straight years, and now they're built for the long run. Were they trusting the process in Houston and just no one really paid attention?
Well, they did. I had an issue with their ownership because their owner took a $50 million discount in order to move them to the American League. And I thought that was a huge disservice to the fan base. People talked about an apathetic fan base in there, and I thought it had to do with the fact that instead of going to St. Louis, Chicago, and Milwaukee, all teams, by the way, in your time zone, and now you're going to Oakland, Seattle, and Anaheim 3 times a year. 3 times a year you're starting games at 9:30 at night. And I just thought that was a disservice to your fan base. And I'm not sure how the long-term effects of that affects that team. Surely winning cures everything, and but that's not to say that that's not something that's still a factor. I don't know how that ownership group is going to attract all these young guys as they approach arbitration and free agency. But look at the Philadelphia Phillies in 2011. Look at the Kansas City Royals in 2015. Look at the Pittsburgh Pirates of 2012. Look at the Baltimore Orioles of 2014. They were all teams that you would say trust the process. The question is, once you get good, you first of all have the postseason success because you don't know when you're going to get back there. And secondly, then it gets expensive.
Right. All right, Seth Everett, baseball season is in the books, and we had a real good Game 7 World Series, and now the off-season's ahead. We'll be talking about it with Seth in this off-season as the Houston Astros, for the first time, are World Series champs. Seth, it's been a great season, pal. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. I'll talk to you soon.